Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we're going to be discussing vehicles in Battlefield. We're going for a little bit more of a laid back video today, no script, nothing like that. It's going to be one of these rambling videos where I just talk about something that has been maybe at the centre of attention on social media, or I've seen a post about, or something really that's just on my mind. This one, as I said, is going to be about vehicles and how DICE approach this in the next Battlefield game. Recently I saw somebody complaining about vehicles being overpowered in Battlefield. I was playing Battlefield 4 at the time. Now if you've ever played BF4, especially if you've played it on PC, but I guess you could say on console as well, on maps like Siege of Shanghai definitely, you will see vehicles dominating. More often than not there'll be somebody who's got 1,000 hours in the game, or they're very experienced, and they'll just be abusing one vehicle, getting hundreds and hundreds of kills. I've done it myself in the past. Many people watching this video will have done as well. And arguably it's not really healthy for the game to have that at all. We've seen it in BF1 as well with vehicles like the Muramets. Even the attack plane at one point was incredibly strong with the ground support loadout. You had the mortar trucks in base. In Battlefield 5 you've got tanks sniping you across the map. The Ju-88 bomber and all the other planes are incredibly strong. Sure, they can all be countered, but they're just really, really good at getting a huge amount of kills and denying people on the ground a lot of fun. Now, in an ideal world, what would happen in a Battlefield game where you've got to have vehicles and infantry, in my opinion, otherwise it's not really a Battlefield game? You want the infantry to have two forms of attack, or two forms at least of dealing with these vehicles. Firstly, they can combat them, take them down. Maybe they've got an anti-air launcher, or they've got a javelin or a stinger or an RPG, whatever it is, they can counter those vehicles, and in a team you'll be much better off at countering the vehicles. You could be in a squad and maybe somebody's got a PLD, somebody's got a javelin, and you can be much more effective than on your own, but either way you can counter those vehicles. The second part is that you need to be able to get away from them, and only a few maps in Battlefield games really offer that at the right sort of level. If you think about maps like Shanghai, there are very few places that you can actually go to avoid vehicles. Even flags like Bravo Objective, which are mostly underground, a tank can still get down there and a heli can still shoot through the gap fairly easily. That is not really fantastic map design if you ask me, although it is fairly good to see that there are those different levels to an objective. DICE really need to nail this in the next game, in my opinion, because it's one of the biggest server killers out there. This is why you see certain maps just completely die, whilst others, like Operation Locker, like maybe Pearl Market and Metro in Battlefield 3, take a look at Battlefield 5 as well. Operation Underground is the most played map as far as I'm aware. They tend to rise to the top, and you don't really get the full Battlefield experience with those maps. Sure, if you love them, that's great. Go and play them all day long. But when you've got new players coming to the game and they get thrown straight into that meat grinder, they're not really getting that full Battlefield experience. They're not spawning in on Caspian Border. If you ever played Battlefield 3 on Caspian Border when there wasn't a jet pilot farming, it is just fantastic. The same can be said for Battlefield 4 on some maps. The minute though you have a player farming away in a vehicle, and yes, they might be really good, but they're shutting the map down and they're just dominating, it brings that fun level down. Now I don't want to see those good players moved off the game. I don't really want to see ranked modes or skill-based matchmaking thrown in. I just want to see an approach that means you can only go on these huge kill streaks if you are really, really good, and maybe if you're working with a teammate as well. And you also have to have maps that allow players to get away from the vehicles. That way you're going to have a much healthier game where infantry players can have that fun, can experience that kind of all-out war, those only in Battlefield moments that you really do only get on those big maps, kind of the open maps in places where you can hit long-range shots and things like that, but they've also got somewhere they can hide away if they need to. I've said this before, but a really good example is Hammerhead on Battlefield 4, part of the Final Stand DLC. It's not the best map in the world. It does kind of miss out on a few things here or there, but it does have a few flags that are completely hidden from the majority of vehicles, and vehicles can kind of go through that icy underpass, but unfortunately for them it can be a very tricky part to navigate. If you're in a tank, the ice can be smashed and you sink through. The LAVs are really slow in the water there and you usually get killed. You can squeeze an attack helicopter through there if you want to, but I don't recommend it. You might have seen in a previous Battlefield video as well, I did some dual vision with my friend Corsair, and we kind of experienced that as well on Wavebreaker. We took the attack helicopter through the bunker. Pretty fun to do, but it takes a lot of skill, or at least a fair amount of skill, to fly through there and not crash and not get hit by a rocket. But the infantry can hide away in there if they want. If I told you that you had to stay outside on Wavebreaker the entire game while I was in the attack helicopter peppering you, you probably wouldn't have a lot of fun. That's just the way it is. Now, I think that vehicles in Battlefield 4 are really, really strong offensively, and it's one of the worst games for this, where you're seeing vehicles going on kill streaks. And yes, they are quite weak defensively as well, so it is balanced that way. But overall, it's definitely a bit too much on the vehicle-focused side on most of the maps. This is probably where most of the complaints come from. I don't really see a lot of people complaining about vehicles on maps like Propaganda, where you've only got 2 tanks per team. Sure, there are no air vehicles, so being underground or in buildings isn't as important, but the hard cover, the way you can get around buildings, get away from tanks, and kind of stay away from them all game if you want to, makes that a really enjoyable map. Other maps just don't have vehicles at all, like Pearl Market and Metro and Locker, like I said, are always going to be at the top of the server list, and they'll always be populated. So I guess the debate that needs to be had really, and the discussions that DICE will have had in the office, has to be how they approach it. As I said, that's how I'd approach it, and how I'd really go about trying to implement a bit of balance in the game, getting those vehicles into the game, because you really have to have them for it to be a Battlefield game at the end of the day, but also making sure that it's an enjoyable experience for those infantry players. One other thing that I've thought about, and I kind of think it would be a good idea in Battlefield games, whenever you see a server that is really badly balanced, and maybe it doesn't have a server balancer, of course Battlefield 5 didn't have one, or still doesn't have one, not sure really what DICE implemented in that game at this point, but when you have servers that are really badly balanced, 1 or 2 experienced vehicle players can turn this over, and even on an infantry focus mode, 1 or 2 infantry players can turn the tide and really help balance a game out, and maybe even win it for that losing side. In my opinion, there should be something in a Battlefield game that allows you as an experienced player to join a losing side. You can choose to do that if you want to, and in doing so you will gain certain perks. Maybe you'll gain something that you'll see on your dog tag, maybe you'll see something that can be on a ribbon or potentially added to the little emblem before your name on the scoreboard. Something that tells everybody else that you're a good player that goes and helps out those teams that aren't really winning as much. That, in my opinion, especially if it was in Battlefield 4, would be something that I'd be interested in if I was in a vehicle. Join a losing team and try and turn it myself, and if I do, and if I help them, then I do get that kind of bonus and that pat on the back. What you usually see on Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 5 a lot of the time, it's all the good players, level 500s, stacking up together and just pummeling a weaker team until the server dies. That is not something that needs to be in Battlefield whatsoever. Instead, some of those good players could be offered a bonus if they go to that enemy team or they join a server on the weaker side and really try and boost that team from a losing position. Let me know what you think of that. As I said, a bit of a ramble today talking about vehicles, and then my idea of maybe balancing servers that are suffering from vehicle tryhards and big team stacks. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.